OK, we will start with this then, and the varying views on whether racecourses' media rights should be transparent, and indeed to what end that is. Cornelius, what's your view on this?
Well, the interview was classic Cruddas, wasn't it?
This is Martin Cruddas, Chief Executive of Arena Racing Company.
The Chief Executive of ARC, and in the Racing Post. There were some very serious points in there, but there was a bit of mischief going on there as well. He loves to rock the boat a little bit, doesn't he? So he made some serious points, particularly about affordability checks, and then I can imagine him giving the interview and probably banging the table when he was saying, if those people want to boycott, I'm not going to be told by any owner or trainer how I run my business, and if anybody. He actually suggested it was illegal to boycott race meetings. Is orchestrating a boycott, is that illegal, or is that?
I don't think anyone's suggested. I mean, is anyone?
No. But well, he said he would. He talked about illegal. I think he used that word during that. If people started talking about boycotts, so there was. He stands his ground. He is somebody absolutely passionate. He's probably about the most dynamic person at the top of racing at the moment. So he's got lots of interesting ideas, but he's absolutely determined in certain areas. And he certainly at the moment doesn't look very likely to come up with the sort of figures that Nevin Truesdale, as you said in your interview with Julian there, came up with some fairly specific figures. Yeah, I want to get this from a trainer's point of view, someone who is successfully running a sort of medium-sized training business. How much of this percolates to you, and how much do you think something like transparency of media rights is important to your business?
And I think it's very difficult for any business to divulge the ins and outs of their business. I completely understand where the racecourses are coming from in many ways, but we are in an industry where we are seeing money coming back to owners and trainers and jockeys and everybody else declining. And we've got to somehow sort this out. So I think we've just got to all work together and come up with a happy solution that everybody is able to keep working with. But it's a tragedy that we've given away so much in the past. Whether it was racecourse fixtures or the doing away with the tote, and we're lagging behind from poor relations to France and Ireland at the moment, and clearly something's got to be done. Otherwise, we are going to fade away into oblivion if we're not careful. Well,
there is no doubt that there is a collective will to transform the fortunes of British racing. And Julian Richmond-Watson referenced there that there has been a debate set for Parliament on the 26th of February, I think it is, Cornelius. This was because of the 100,000 signatures, again, that Julian was referring to. This was a petition that was instigated by Nevin Truesdale with a lot of cross-industry support to get the issue of affordability checks and what was in the government's white paper properly debated as regards the future of horse racing.
And the petition has got to the level where, by law, it has to be debated in Parliament. So it shows what...
Well, no, not necessarily. So this was the point, because 100,000 signatures triggered the idea that it could be debated in Parliament, but it is not a legal requirement for it to be. So there was still a question of whether it would or wouldn't. People were worried that Matt Hancock's debate of a few weeks ago had skewered it.
But anyway, there is going to be this talk, which is really important, and it shows what racing can do when it gets together and rows in the same direction, doesn't it? Because there was a real effort to get people to sign this petition. People did, and people outside this bubble. We've been talking about it in this bubble in particular for so long. Probably outside the bubble, there's been this is it's not really been seriously considered. Now it will be seriously considered in Parliament, and not only can they talk about the effect of affordability checks on betting and racing, but also on human rights as well, whether it's completely unfair that people should have their affairs examined as much as has been suggested it should be. So it's a big day for racing. It's going to be a really fascinating day in Parliament, and I think now the next part of the racing move is you've signed the petition. Now make certain your MP gets to the debate.
Who's your local MP, Jeremy?
Ian Little Granger.
And have you given him a good kick up the backside and told him to get on with it?
I'm going to.
And is he a good guy?
He's a good guy. Big on words. Not so on...
He's a member of Parliament.
Actions, maybe. But I mean, I think a lot of MPs, I mean, as you say, it's a very small bubble we all operate in. And I'm not
and this
sure,
is crucial for the bubble.
And I'm not sure how much the majority of the general public have any idea of what this is going to have effect on racing in particular.
And John,
and I think we've got to get that across in our, our industry, how much that will affect our little business.
Yeah.
And the number of people we employ and jockeys and everything else.
And who's your MP, Alan?
Good question. I'll come back to you on that one.
Find out and give him or her what for.
Fun enough, I wrote to mine this week about something quite different. He made a cameo appearance in Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, my MP's Nadeem Sahawi. And he played himself, played himself rather well, I thought, in Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. And he'll be getting another email tomorrow reminding him to be there. But I think he's quite enjoying his the post office stuff that he's involved in at the moment, but he needs to think about that. It's like all issues, isn't it? The post office, which has been high. I'm not comparing affordability checks and Mr. Bates against the post office, but everyone knew about the post office situation for quite a long time and didn't think it really was, it didn't concern them particularly. Here's another matter. People don't think it really concerns them, do I get involved? It is important, and here's a real good opportunity to get involved.
OK. Let's talk about the highest profile national hunt horse in training in this era and quite a few eras as well, Constitution Hill. And the debate has raged again this week. Nicky Henderson gave an interview to Robbie Stelling in the Newbury Daily, where he said that did he really need to run him in the not reschedule, but put in a different place in the calendar, International Hurdle, which now takes place on Trials Day, having shown some enthusiasm for that project earlier in the season. And it's the normal debate about, well, we've got these stars, how often do we see them? And David Ellsworth has gone in quite hard on this debate, Jeremy, and said, in his day, Desert Orchid and a lot of his other stars,
Can I just read the quote?
Read the Ellsworth
I'm the biggest fan of Constitution Hill, he says in the Racing Post today. He's the most exciting horse we've seen for a long time, but he might only run 3 times this season. And when he does run, it's exhibition stuff. We don't need exhibitions, we need competition.
Well, there's 2 parts to that, aren't there? One is the paucity of opposition or lack of depth of horses who are prepared to take him on, Jeremy. But the other part is, if he were yours,
you've got to nurture these horses, and whilst any race, when you're as good as he is, it all looks seamless and easy for him. All these horses hang by the thinnest of threads, and I can completely understand why he would want to protect him for the very, very big days in the spring. And, I think that for the owner and the trainer is probably forefront of their minds. I mean, we're, whilst, this is where I come back to my point of, are we, racing doesn't sometimes know where we are, whether we're a sport, whether we're an entertainment industry. I mean, is it the owner and the trainer's job to entertain the public, or is it their job to look after their lovely asset that can provide them with the really golden days in spring, which is where I think they're coming from.
And have you managed to answer that question?
Not to Nicky Henderson.
I think that this ties in with how Nicky trains his horses, and I think he's one of the greatest trainers of all time. Let the genius train how he wants to train.
Simple as that.
Yeah, like
They don't normally run from. He doesn't normally run the horse, does he? Within Christmas.
No, not this one. It's interesting this because, I'd love your insight on this because things are, and it's interesting that David Ellsworth should have weighed in because he was champion trainer when I was getting into the sport when I was a 9 or 10-year-old with all those great horses who he ran a lot, but culturally things have shifted a bit, and I don't know whether that's to do with modern training methods or whatever it is. But when you look even at, Nicky Henderson is one of the most brilliant bits of training he's ever accomplished is getting CU then to win a 3rd champion hurdle. He had to run him 9 days before the champion hurdle in order to make that happen. Now that would be unthinkable for any trainer, no matter who it is. Well, so what's evolved, what's changed over the decades, do you think, in the way that we condition and prepare these horses? Or is it just our mindset?
I think slightly the mindset is that all road. I mean, it's like Christmas. I mean, you journalists are as bad as anybody. You're like small children before Christmas. Cheltenham is Christmas.
But that's because we're excited and passionate about the sport. Would you rather we didn't care?
No, I'm not at all. I mean, I think that's. I think we've created a slight monster in terms of those festivals in the spring. That's one of the reasons why we don't. possibly. You know, I'm not lucky enough to have a horse at that level, but why they are so mindful, because there is this pressure to perform on those 3 days in the spring. And
you think the pressure's intensified, which is...
And I think that makes you more nervous.
Do you think the pressure didn't exist when David Ellsworth was training Desert Orchid and, you know, he's the obvious horse to jump out and all those other good ones?
I'm sure the pressure existed, but I think it has intensified, in my experience. You know, as those festivals have got more commercial, I feel that the pressure to perform there, and your season seems to be judged entirely about how well or not you get on at those festivals, and I think that must alter the mindset of you and the owner.
You get on extremely well at those festivals with a handful of horses that you run.
I haven't had too many winners there.
As long as, yeah, just stay out of the steward.
Here's just a footnote to that. You know, it became more trendy after the turn of the century to run horses less often. Do trainers sometimes hide behind that fact that it has become more of a trend?
Well, this is what I was trying to get to.
Absolutely, and so have they become a little bit... Well, Nicky actually said in the quote in the Newbury Weekly News, wasn't it, everyone will call me a wimp. Are people being wimps?
Well, are we selling the sport short by not... I mean, Els's comment was really we should run more in handicaps, and then it makes the sport more attractive as a viewing platform throughout the year. Is that where we are losing customers in terms of betting revenue and people at the racecourse?
And there's a nice piece on the At the Races website that Kevin Blake's written in similar vein this week, which I would urge you to go and have a look at as well, which discusses maybe how you could reshape some of the Cheltenham Festival and make it more competitive by putting more handicaps in. I'm going to get fined.
Is there no alarm? Do we not have an alarm clock on this anymore? Do we not have the alarm clock on this anymore?
I can hear it, but for some extraordinary reason, nobody else can. Kielan Woods has got the wrong end of a ban, a totting up ban for whip use, and he got referred under the new system, and he's ended up with, what is it, 5 days, is it? Anyway, this is his statement. By the time I reach the end of the suspension, I'll have missed around a third of the year. I've got no one to blame but myself. I'm going to spend this time off getting to the bottom of why I seem to have a mental block when it comes to this issue, making sure that whatever the issue is, I get it fixed. Right, Alan, this is for you, really. Is he right to, for want of a better phrase, be so self-flagellating, or is there a wider issue that absolves him somewhat of his responsibility?
I don't know, what was the word, self-flagellating?
Yes, beating himself up.
I've never heard that one before, but I think he's right to be so self-flagellating. No, I think he's broken the rules numerous times, and I think it's a positive thing he's come out and made a statement and taken the blame. And ultimately, the rules are there in black and white, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, and we've got to adhere to them. And I think he's, I think coming out and saying something like that might sort of almost register in his mind. And I was reading some of the different things he's trying to do to change his approach, and he said he's got a mental block on it at the end of a race, and I think he's got to, work out a way, set rules in his own head. I know I've never counted once in a race how many times I've used my whip, but I've usually got a little system that works for me.
What's your system?
Well, I know if I use the whip before I leave the back straight, I've got to really think about using it again. And then it's use it once, use it twice, put it down. Use it once, use it twice, put it down. And if you're doing that from 4 out, you've got to be considerate. And the longer you can go without using it, the better. It's just these little things. And I think he's got to work out a system for himself.
All right. On we go. We've saved 6 seconds, and we're going to talk about Sunday.
That was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was good. You are good. You are good. Have you done just a minute? Right. Sunday evenings. Are Sunday evenings all right for riding?
Look, I think I think it impacts the flat racing probably a bit more.
No floodlit jumping on a Sunday night?
No, I don't think so. Maybe in the summer racing, but I think it's probably just Sunday evenings are fine if you're not racing 340 days a year anyway, sort of thing, or 320 days a year, whatever these top flat jockeys are, and a lot of the top jump boys. Yeah, it's tricky. I think from a jockey's point of view, you could just, there's the argument that you can turn down rides, you can stay at home, but the culture, the way we act, it just doesn't tie in with that, and we basically got to go with his rides, really. So I think we are the employees of the sport, and seen by the sort of the hierarchies, and they're sort of subcontracted us out more and more for these media rights and all the rest of it. So from racing's point of view, it's they're trying to get more money in. I think it's to the negative. This is to the detriment of jockeys, trainers and stable staff, and you go on so much about mental health, and it's not helping on that front, I'd say.
They want us to start racing at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and they want us to race at 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday. From a trainer point of view, it's probably less impactful. I think from the staff, I think you look at a travelling head lass. They can be leaving to go racing on the Saturday morning, and they can be leaving at 2 o'clock in the morning in order to be racing at 9, 10 o'clock.
Well, from your place, you need to leave on about Thursday.
Well, possibly. And then
it's about an hour to get to the nearest day road.
Racing on the Sunday, they're getting home from their racing at 10 o'clock or whatever it is on a Sunday night, and they're getting back at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then we expect them to work the next day.
Having said that, though, so sorry, I'm eating into it again. I'll be very quick, but certainly there were some very articulate opposing quotes from Rab Havlin and from Callum Shepherd, but there were quite a lot, and they didn't get quite the same coverage. There were quite a lot of people who were saying, actually, particularly amongst stable staff, it was good money and it was worth doing. And although there are stable staff who are married and have families who aren't that keen, there are others who are rather keener than that. So I don't think it's quite as black and white as some people suggest.
The only thing I'd say is the Sunday racing supplement didn't last very long. When we were being paid more to have a runner on us, and that is
so. There's all this money.
It's fine if not going to last.
If the money's there, well then we'll do it. But
on we move. Denise Coates has been. How much has she been? Has she paid herself this year?
270. Is it?
Boss about 365. Is it just the 270 million?
Yeah, million.
So here's what I'd ask you: is this a good look? Indeed, some people would question its ethics, full stop. But is it a good look to pay yourself that kind of salary, particularly at a time when the betting industry is under such intense scrutiny?
Well, she has earned the money, hasn't she? The company is an expanding company. It's actually lost money in the States. Didn't make quite the same money. I suppose there are going to be some people turning around and saying this is one of the most controversial. I'm about to cough. Hold on a second. This is one.
Sorry, that wasn't the controversial. Was that an expression of your disapproval at Denise Coates' salary?
Absolutely, an expression of my envy. But the fact is, the company is a very successful company. Employs a lot of people. A lot of people rely on it for their livelihoods. She is paying. She'd be paying more than 40% tax, won't they? So how much of that is going into the exchequer? She's not overseas. She's not trying to.
I think she is the single biggest UK taxpayer.
Yeah, and she isn't overseas. She's not living in some tax haven somewhere. She's employing a lot of people in that part of the country, Staffordshire area, Stoke-on-Trent area. So, I suppose on the one hand you could say it's not great optics. On the other hand, you could say, well, here's a company earning a lot of money and she's paying a lot of tax and employing a lot of people who can pay their own tax.
What would you do if you had access to that sort of a salary?
I would keep training horses until it was all gone.
Which is about the best answer we've ever had on this show.
That last you 5 years or 10 years?
I don't know. We'll go large at the sales anyway.
Might last you a couple of years. Right, Ballymore are no longer going to be sponsoring what's officially registered as the Baring-Bingham Novices Hurdle, though nobody ever calls it that, the 2.5 mile race at the Cheltenham Festival. They did sponsor it, then it became the Neptune, then it became the Ballymore again. And I talked about this earlier in the week on my podcast, and I've had some conversations with the Jockey Club subsequent to that, and they are very keen to stress that of the 6 races at the festival that do not have a sponsor listed beside them, 3 of them are intentionally never sponsored and never put up for sponsorship.
Martin Pipe would be one, would it?
Yeah, and the National Hunt Chase is another one. And there will be an announcement about what is going to happen with this Novices Hurdle forthcoming, but the details were a bit opaque.
I suppose it's a situation where a sponsor which is involved with racing's biggest event has decided that after a period of time and of great support, they're not going to do it anymore.
And I suppose the added level of significance is that the sponsor is owned by someone who is absolutely steeped in the sport and has a ton of horses in training.
But then equally, I suppose the business is quite broad. They've got various commitments, and emphasis has to move from one thing to another. And I think Cheltenham has got quite a record of not necessarily, here we are on January the 14th. It's still a couple of months to go until, even though we've been talking about it since probably the media have been talking about it since the Saturday afterwards of last year. There's still, in terms of getting sponsors in, etc., there's plenty of time to get people involved. So I don't think we're quite in sort of intensive care sort of stage at the moment, are we? But it is worth recording that Ballymore, a big and supportive company of horse racing, has decided to stop that support. Having said that, they could be back in the future.
Yeah, and we reported last week that Betfred had extended their support of the Oaks and Derby Festival at Epsom. And on to a subject that I know was exercising you, and I did speak with the Jockey Club CEO earlier in this week about the value of the veterans chase, the rerouted veterans chase at Warwick, which had dipped by 25%.
Yeah, from 100,000 pot to 75,000. Now, I know there are reasons for this, and they are to do with things like...
Well, things like sponsorship.
And income on the actual day.
And most of these meetings aren't insured, so you lose a ton of money when you have an abandoned fixture.
I just feel there is a possible argument that the veterans final should be made an exception, because this is a sort of Grand National or a sort of Gold Cup for a certain type of horse. There are it was started amongst with a great deal of trumpeting a few years ago. There were going to be all these qualifiers and then £100,000 final. And I think that they could have worked out a way of making it £100,000 final once again in this particular case, because other races that are abandoned and are moved, there are then alternatives to be pursued. But this is an absolute target. Horses like particular I-Right was one in particular, had been aimed at this for quite some time.
But where do you find the money from?
Well, there are reserves.
You can't just put your hand down and say, well, there's 25 grand we don't have.
Is it actually a Jockey Club thing, or is it a British Horse Racing Authority? It's 25 grand.
Well, there's five different reasons why you can't. You've got to have the levy board have got to give the contribution for a rescheduled race. You've got to get the sponsor to match the contribution that they were going to have originally at Sandown Park. You've not got the money because you probably haven't insured the fixture, because no underwriters will insure January fixtures now anyway. It is hard.
But I think there are exceptions to be made, and although 25 grand doesn't necessarily hide down at the back of the sofa, fact is it's not a fortune, and this is a big and popular and successful series, and making it another £100,000 race would have been a good thing to have done.
I think you should write to Denise Coates.
Do you think
pocket change?
Get her to personally guarantee the money for the veterans
because
chase.
This series has been a remarkable success, and even though it was batting number 2 behind the long distance chase at the classic chase at...
Do you want a veterans final at the Cheltenham Festival?
No, that would be a disaster.
There we go. Right, and those were this week's talking points.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.